From Utah Public Radio, this is UnDisciplined. For most of our lives, we are taught that getting older is something to fear, that wrinkles are a sign of the coming of some sort of an end, a time in which the best versions of ourselves, the one that was most valuable to the rest of the world, is going away. Ashton Applewhite has long been at the forefront of the argument that this story isn't just wrong and it isn't just harmful, it's systemically discriminatory. 10 years ago, she published a book that would go on to become a touchstone of the global anti-ageism movement. It's called This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. And in it, she challenged the myths of decline and irrelevance and called for a radical reimagining of what late life can be like. Today, a decade later, Applewhite is a decade older, and she's living inside the very argument she helped put into the world. And that's teaching her a lot. Ashton Applewhite, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I want to start today by sort of defining the field here, because I think that most people, and this includes myself, tend to think about ageism as prejudice against older people. But there's a broader way that you want people to think about this idea.
Yeah. And an underlying broader way to think about aging itself. We are aging from the minute we are born. To live is to age is to live. Ageism is any discrimination or prejudice or judgment or assumption about someone or a group of people on the basis of how old they happen to be. And so ageism is something that affects us lifelong, just as we are aging lifelong. So it is the one universal human experience, which makes it incredibly interesting.
And so you can have ageism against children, you can have ageism against people in their alleged primes, you can have ageism of people in the final decades of their life. That's all within the definition.
Yeah. It's hard to be young, it's hard to be middle-aged, and it's hard to be old in different ways. Every life stage has its benefits and its challenges.
You have recently started using a cane, and I'm so curious about this because you often write and talk about internalized ageism. And I'm wondering what this experience is teaching you. What negative stereotypes and beliefs you had about what a cane meant before you started to use one.
One thing I have thought a lot about, which was not on my radar very much when the book was published, was about the intersection between ageism and an even more clunky and little known word, ableism, which is
Mm.
stigma and prejudice and discrimination around how our bodies and our minds function. A lot of what we think of as ageism is anxiety around the loss of physical or cognitive function. As we get older, one certainty is our bodies work less well. But when you start to use a cane, which is associated with illness and injury and frailty, you are appearing in the world in a different way. My partner and I have started using canes. He's a little older. He's more apprehensive about hurting himself than I am, but also I'm the preacher in the family, and I felt like, okay, I should walk the walk, literally. But he headed out the door with his cane, and it took me weeks to get past the shadow of those little old lady, the hunched over couple. It's always a couple on the road signs, right? And like, am I that person? And I'll just wait until I really need it. Well, you don't need it until after you've had the fall. That means you really need it, right?
Yeah, and you were trying to get
And
ahead of that.
trying to get ahead of it, right? Trying people say, "Why are you using a cane? What happened?" Totally good question. And when I say, "Well, nothing," they're puzzled. Nothing happened. Why is she doing this? So I got huge response to that essay, and people said, "Well, my cane's in the closet, my cane's in the garage, and I'll use it when I need it. I don't need it yet." Well, when is our yet, right? And the ideal would be to use it to prevent the fall. It's been super snowy here in New York, and there I can stand steady as a sequoia. I can walk a reasonably straight line, but my balance is not as good as it used to be.
Nobody's is in the snow.
Yeah,
right? I mean, like, that's something that could happen to anyone.
And I'm super glad to have the cane, not to lean on, just to touch, sometimes
Mm.
to lean on if I lose my balance, but mainly it's for proprioception. It's to orient my body in space. And in that narrow little chasm, with 60 New Yorkers rushing at you, just to touch the cane on the edge of the snowbank next to me, then I'm steady and I'm less apprehensive about approaching the chasm. And the biggest risk for falling is being afraid of falling.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild? And I'm less afraid, so I'm more relaxed. I stand straighter. Both those things make me less likely to fall. But it was not easy to walk out the door with that cane.
How interesting was that as an experience for you that it wasn't easy for you to do? Because, as you say, you're the preacher, right? So, like, "Hey, physician, heal thyself." What's going on here?
Yeah. There's my scientific term is age cooties. We don't want to think about aging, it's icky, and we equate aging with loss. And there is a relationship, as I already touched on, but it's not automatic, right? I happen to be 73. There's lots of 73-year-olds who run marathons, and there's lots of 73-year-olds who use wheelchairs. It's not rigidly connected. But in order to walk out the door with the cane, you have to overcome your internalized bias, right? Because we live in a culture that says you should be young, you should be fast, you should look youthful, you should move and continue to look and move as much like your younger self as possible, which is impossible, punishing, expensive, etc. And when you walk out with a cane, you have to silence those voices or at least reduce them into the background and say, I am going to listen to myself and believe that I'm taking care of myself better by acting preventively. And also, Ashton, as you say, as a preacher, I want to set an example for my kids, for my friends, of refusing to be ashamed and doing this thing that, in a way, honest to God, I never anticipated is liberating.
You thought that it was gonna make you more cautious, and it has liberated you.
Yeah.
How many experiences with aging have been like that, where the thing that you fear, the thing that you were told to fear is, in your experience, very different than how you imagined it would be?
I would zoom out and you say, in your experience with aging, aging is living. As we move through life, we learn more about ourselves. We learn about risks that we're willing to take, risks we took already and don't want to take again, right? But when you look at the thing that scares you, it becomes less fearsome. And I am proud of myself for mustering up the courage or the whatever to defy this. I mean, I'm sorry, I was going to say defy the stereotype, but it's not about defiance. It's about accepting that I am now visible in the world in a different way. And that if people think less of me for that, that is their loss. And
This
that I
is so
hope some
interesting because
people,
the way I'm hearing you say this, you treat it a little more like a bicycle helmet. Like, you trying to just make sure that injury doesn't happen. You're being a little more safe. You're being thoughtful about the way that you approach the world.
yeah.
We don't wear helmets, hopefully, usually after we have a bike accident.
Right. I mean, the idea behind the mobility aids are to help you move more safely. So the goal of the people who design these products is no, we want you to stay as active as you are able to and as you want to, and to encourage you to move, but to move safely.
This is really interesting. When you wrote this chair rocks, you were already very fluent in the the architecture of ageism. But now it sure does feel to me like I'm getting an insider's view on all of this rather than an expert's view. And you were both of these things.
Yeah.
This is I love this especially because it feels to me a little like I don't know why I'm getting this, like, idea of, like, a sports reporter, right? Many sports reporters or sports commentators are former athletes, but they don't become athletes, decades into their careers usually. That's usually not how that goes. You knew a whole bunch about this, and now you're living it out.
Well, I didn't know what lay ahead, but I am certainly tapping into my own experience. I mean, I started writing about it because I realized I was very apprehensive about getting older. And I'm nerdy. I'm not an academic, but I just started to think about, well, what's it really like? Why don't I look around me and conduct a little, um, you know, information seeking and research? I started talking to people over 80 who work because that was sort of a nice, safe way to get my feet in the water in hindsight, without having to deal with scary stuff like incapacity. And the more I learned, the less I feared. Yeah, I'm living it and I am learning as I go. And my experience is mine alone. There are lots of people whose experiences are completely different, but we have a lot to learn from the disability community who are unbelievably ingenious, and thoughtful and celebrate interdependence and are proud of the fact that, I don't know if proud is the right word, but they are not who they are despite their disability. They are who they are because of their disability. They do not hide it, and they refuse to see it in terms of a fault or flaw with them. The flaw, they would say, is in a society and an environment that does not give them the same choices and opportunities that they would have if they didn't have a disability. There I am talking about people with disabilities as they.
Hmm.
And is that, am I one of them? Are we talking about us? I happen to be now deaf in one ear. And I had a fantastic exchange with a person who's become a friend, Peter Fremlin, who runs a newsletter called Disability Debrief. And I said, am I disabled? And he had a great answer. His example was, if you lost your little finger, you probably wouldn't notice. But if you were a professional keyboard player, you would be disabled, right? So it depends. It depends on how we relate to the condition. It depends on how long we've had it. It depends on how much money we have, on how much freedom we have, on what we do, on where we live, 1,000 things. So each experience is unique. And of course, then the way we experience it changes over time.
You spend so much time thinking about this, rethinking about this, assessing what you came to believe before. I don't imagine, though, that when you first dove into this subject, as a person who had dived into many subjects as a researcher, as a writer, as an activist before, that you probably intended to make this such a big part of your life.
I am a generalist, and I suspect as a journalist, you also are. And two things. One is that aging touches on every aspect of being human. Every domain of study, there is always a connection. So there's 1,000 avenues of interest, no matter what little piece of it you want to focus on. And the other thing is, aging and ageism are so unexamined. There's really so many aha moments. One example is, what do you think of as criteria for diversity? People think race, maybe they think class, they think gender, sexual orientation usually. What about age? No one says that's a dumb idea. They say, why didn't I think of that?
When this work sort of became, when it began to catch fire,
Hmm.
did that also give you a sense that not only, okay, wow, people are interested in this, I'm sure glad I wrote about it, but that real change was on its way because so many people were talking about it. It all of a sudden was a, oh, it was part of the zeitgeist.
Well, I love that you use the phrase catch fire. Even I, from my perch, that seems overly ambitious, perhaps, but one of the many reasons I am heartened by progress is that there is so much more awareness of ageism than there used to be. And that awareness starts individually. So many people, oh, ageism is so terrible. It's gotten so much worse. Classic example was the, awful business around Joe Biden's debate performance and gerontocracy and blah, 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 and how everything's so ageist. That exchange, that whole cultural moment did a tremendous amount to propel awareness of ageism into the culture and also ableism. A few people even learned that word because it was really about his cognitive and physical capacity. Lots of other candidates the same age got away without being tarred with the same brush because of presenting themselves differently. So that was interesting. I think I was in the right place at the right time. I think I'm a good communicator, but also it's funny, people think, "Oh, I don't want to talk about aging." You open that door a crack and everyone is pushing to get in because they do want to talk about it, even though they may not know it.
Has that door being opened increasingly over the past decade resulted, do you think, in meaningful change? Like, what are we doing better as individuals and society when it comes to ageism?
I take heart in the work that it's hard to talk about this at this particularly gloomy political moment when there seems to be so much retrenchment from my point of view, but I think thoughtful progressive people have given a lot of thought to racism and how we can address it, to sexism and women's rights and how we can address this, to creating more opportunity for more people, and to hitch age to that sled is a much smaller ask than plowing the field to start with. I just mixed up a sled metaphor and a planting metaphor. Don't attack me. So I think a lot of those habits of mind and the notion of intersectionality, all these forms of prejudice, inform and compound each other. I think that idea is a lot closer to the surface now, and that is a good thing. The flip side of that coin, because I remember when I first learned about intersectionality, which came from a Black legal scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw, it felt heavy, like all these weights and, systems of oppression and smushing people. And they do. If you are a woman, it is harder to age. If you are a woman of color, it's harder yet. If you have a disability, it's harder yet. So intersectionality is very real and it's essential to address these systems as an interconnected system because you can't get rid of one without addressing the other. But the uplifting part of that, as I see it, is that when we chip away at any form of bias, we chip away at the fear and ignorance that underlie them all. So activism is intersectional too.
Some of the words that you are using here have become dirty words,
Oops.
in the modern political discourse, right? Activism and intersectionality and diversity. How dare you? I'm wondering if this environment in which there is such pushback on other forms of, what I think a good portion of our country now derides as woke, is also pushing back against the conversations, the very necessary conversations that have started to happen surrounding ageism and ableism.
Maybe I'm just being perverse or absurdly optimistic or just seeing what I want to see. But in a way, the fact that ageism and ableism are not yet as visible culturally means we can kind of slip under the radar a bit. The woke alarm doesn't, ring as loudly. And so I think that gives us an opportunity to talk about age as a table around which we all can join. It's in a sense, it's sort of um, an end run around identity politics, right? It's a thing we have all experienced being treated unfairly because of our age. So I think it is a way to find common humanity, and I think we need to push back against all the things. I think talking about age and ageism actually provides kind of a subversive undercover way to get in the tent and start talking about access to opportunity. Ageism is often the first form of discrimination that white men encounter.
Oh,
And that I think is a real opportunity. Like, oh, yeah, this is what it feels like to be discriminated against on the basis of something you can't change about yourself.
you seem very open about being both proud of aging and also acknowledging being scared.
Yeah,
I love this complexity.
that's why it's so interesting. And Certainly one thing I have gotten better about, because I'm very blunt and unguarded.
Who, you?
Bit of a bull in the china shop, and I have gotten better at meeting people where they are and understanding woke language alert, the value of lived experience. I remember I was giving a talk in Beverly Hills at a women's organization, but at the time I was a little judgy about people dyeing their hair to cover the gray. Because until everyone who needs a cane could use a cane is using a cane, until everyone who's sick of dyeing the gray, covering the gray, stops covering the gray, it's still going to be stigmatized. That's a fact. But it's not. A woman kindly came up to me privately afterwards and she said, "You don't get it. I have children to support. And if I didn't dye my hair, my boss would guess how old I am and I'd lose my job." And
Hmm.
she was so right.
It's not just aesthetic, it's not just vanity, it's not just fighting against aging, it's practical.
And there's people who love dyeing their hair, and there's people who say, especially around women and women's appearances, there are so many people telling women what we should and shouldn't do, shouldn't wear, shouldn't work out, look like, all the things. I am not one of those voices. Aging is complicated for all of us. It's doubly so for women because aging is gendered. And we each need to navigate this stuff in our own way and at our own speed.
When you look back at the person who wrote this book, what do you think she still underestimated?
This sounds like saccharine, but I certainly underestimated how compelling the subject would remain and become more so. I mean, partly because of one of the things that's pushing things forward is just the fact that everywhere in the world, more people are living longer. We have a fantastic opportunity, which is the social and economic capital of millions more adults in human history, many of whom I don't want to say healthy because no one's completely healthy after middle age or whatever. No one's as active as they used to be. But we have a big challenge and an extraordinary opportunity to help create a world that supports people being in the world in interesting and effective ways from childhood on. And that is really interesting and really important. I think another really important thing is to reach out to younger people, make younger friends, think of things you like to do, and find mixed age groups to do it with, because for sure, we need all ages on the team, around the table, in the boat, if we are going to rise to these challenges. We live in such an age segregated society, which is a function of ageism, that we tragically don't spend enough time in mixed age groups, and we need friends and allies of all ages.
Do you have friends way down on the age spectrum,
We
Joan?
do.
People
We
in
do.
their, teens and 20s?
We we were lucky enough to once the kids were out, a friend, my partner's actually college roommate, took us to a club and we got religion. It was really, really, really fun. And that, I think, was part of what introduced us to a bunch of younger friends who love, we don't do it as often as we used to. Although my partner took his cane out on the dance floor. He was steadier, so he was more graceful and more calm and more happy. I think liking to do that has introduced us to a lot of younger people. It does take work, conscious effort, and it's awkward and it's slow. But if you start to meet people who, of course, you can finish this sentence, Matthew, who are not like you in obvious ways, you'll meet more people like them. And the more diversity you get used to, woke word, the more mixy uppy is my word,
Mixy up.
the people you hang out with, then the more mixy uppy the people you get introduced to through them. And that has made our life so much more interesting and fun.
I wish everyone more mixy uppiness.
Yeah, I do too.
That's Ashton Applewhite. She's a Brooklyn based writer and activist and a leading voice in the global movement to expose and dismantle ageism. And she speaks widely from the main stage at TED to the United Nations. Her book is This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism. and it is about to turn 10 years old. Ashton Applewhite, thank you.
Thank you so much. You really got me to bang my head against some new stuff, which is always fun, and that is what makes this stuff so interesting.
UnDisciplined is a production of Utah Public Radio. And if you happen to live in Utah, you can listen to us on UPR every Thursday morning at 10:30. If you're not in Utah, you can still listen to every episode of UnDisciplined wherever you get your podcasts. Public radio stations across the country have had a substantial cut to funding, so now more than ever, it's important to support this work if you are able. You can do that at donate.nprstations.org/UPR. Our producer is Maxium Dorian. Our theme music is Little Idea by Benjamin Tissot. And I'm Matthew LaPlante. Thanks for listening. Now go have big ideas.